I think we'll see how it goes. So if everyone could take their seats, please. So I'll us to introduce then Robert, or do you want to do it?
No, I'll
okay, so we hand over to you and you guys do the whole session.
Robert, just let me... good, very good. I like the vibe. Benjamin Curnier is fine?
Okay, so if I could ask everyone to take a seat again. We're about to begin the next... So we're really jumping into the substance here. And this session is titled, What the Market Wants. So we're moving into the substance of the conversation. Let me just get the right slides up. So this session is from pipeline to deployment, strengthening private sector execution. So everyone, if you could take a seat, please. We're about to start. Hi, everyone. Let's take a seat. We're starting again. We'll figure it out. Maybe we'll figure it out when we get to the breakout. But just somewhere where like the guys. Okay, people are still coming through, but that's fine. I've just tried to round them up again. Over to you, Najma.
Thank you, everybody. For session number 2, we're going to look at pipeline to developments and how to strengthen private sector execution. And I would like for you to warmly welcome our next speaker, Benjamin Curnier, who is a principal green mini-grids officer with Sustainable Energy for Africa within Africa Development Bank. Please join me in welcoming Benjamin on stage.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone. So, yes, as you heard, I'm Benjamin Curnier from the Sustainable Energy Fund for Africa, which is a special fund managed by the African Development Bank. I am just going to present a few short slides, then I'm going to hand over to Robert, my colleague, whom you've already heard this morning. And then we'll also have some friendly developers up here, and we'll explore a little bit about their activities and what they're up to at the moment in the space of technical assistance. Really, I just want to make sure that this is the right slides. Yes, okay. So really the purpose of my intro this morning is to talk a little bit about the technical assistance program that we've been running for a number of years, and that is now evolving into a new phase. So many of you, I think, will be familiar with the Africa Mini-Grid Acceleration Program, AMAP 1. AMAP 1 was a $7 million technical assistance program. We implemented it from 2021 to 2026. As you can see, we're wrapping up activities ahead of the deadline of July. The objective was to build stronger private sector mini-grid enabling environments in countries across the continent, and therefore was a technical assistance program that was primarily directed at public sector beneficiaries. So we worked with rural electrification agencies, we worked with ministries of energies, and we worked with regulators. There were 4 pillars. Opening new markets, really sort of working with the public sector beneficiaries, as I've talked about, and then also catalytic finance support, so designing new financing tools, innovative financing. I loathe that expression. We've heard it far too many times, as if there is a silver bullet that the combined minds could somehow not have come up with by now. And then strengthening the ecosystem, so sort of access to market insights. In reality, much of the time was spent on this sort of first pillar, opening new markets, and we've largely managed to disperse much of the money. So really, sort of, what are some of the outputs? Well, we worked with 11 countries. We worked on sort of 5 large regulatory and policy frameworks in countries. We identified as many as 1,000 mini-grid sites. We did 520 feasibility studies. And so you can see sort of quite a few numbers. And there on the left-hand side, some of the countries we worked in. So we did GIS-based work in Angola, Cameroon, Mauritania, Mali. We did rural electrification plans in Mali. We've done quite a lot of work looking at, for example, the procedures document for the ADER in Madagascar. So you can see sort of an eclectic mix of activities that was delivered across those 5 years. But what did we learn? Was it good? Did we achieve what we set out to do? I'm not going to lie, I think it was very hard. And one of the things that we realized is a relatively small team in CEFA, working obviously with a lot of beneficiaries across the continent, is we struggled really to develop, I think, in-depth relationships with those recipients. And as a consequence of which, there was a little bit of a fly-in, fly-out model, right? We would sort of work on some terms of reference, we would sort of set those to a consultant, they would deliver a piece of work, and then we would fly out of town, sort of activity. And I think that the reality is, I fear that many of the recommendations, whilst solid in their content, weren't necessarily absorbed, cogitated upon, and implemented at the point of usage. And I think, therefore, that led us to the conclusion that I think technical assistance for public sector beneficiaries, I think, needs to be iterative, it needs to be intensive, and I think it needs to be longer term. And I think the reality is that we weren't set up to do that in an effective manner. So, that's not to say that the work we did, wasn't valuable, wasn't useful. I think there are lots of sort of really sort of great.
So we thought that's the sort of rationale of how we can support that component of the market. But then moving onto the pillar 2, we thought, well, we also need to graduate other developers into that kind of level of maturity, or onto that level of maturity. So that focus was, and again, we working very closely with AMDA, was to sort of coming out of the market assessment was, what do developers need? And a lot of it is around, and I think it was actually AMDA's sort of 2.0 strategy, if I recall correctly, that spoke about the valley of death. At some point you can there's enough sort of grant funding out there, goodwill, and you can get your first or second or third mini-grid. But then when it comes to genuine capital raise on more sophisticated markets, it grinds to a halt. So I'm thinking in a sense, what we want to do is to help those developers raise the capital to get to the next level, those supposedly trapped in the valley of death. So we will be providing, well, I'll get into more detail now. So that is basically placing C-suite executives with a finance and legal background in these organizations on a part-time basis over sort of 12 to 18 months. Okay, then the pillar 3 is a knowledge platform. So what we had the mini-grid help desk, and we've engaged with the market in various different ways. And we kind of felt that maybe it was time to sort of move on. And I won't go into too much detail about it, but effectively it sort of works around this knowledge platform that we've had developed. And one of the key features is, yes, I mean, there are resources, and there's publications, there's new information coming out all the time. So there is a dedication to that, to sort of curating and preserving knowledge and sharing knowledge. But we've also introduced, it's at an early stage, a sort of a tools platform that is not just information, but it's implementation. That it's not just reading sort of opportunity studies or whatever, but it's also tools. We're in a far more operational stage. We're developing mini-grids. There's so many hurdles and requirements to go through: impact assessment, site identification, ESG, compliance, and all sorts of things. And a lot of these are effectively tools. So what we want to do is host those tools, not necessarily originated by ourselves, but by our partners, on the knowledge platform, and enable some sort of feedback, like a positive or negative feedback loop, that people can comment on the application of particular tools in particular contexts, how good or not they were, and we can sort of construct a more standardized approach, increasingly more standardized approach to the kind of templates and tools and contract. Okay, got to hurry. Okay, and the Pillar 4 is a sort of a reserve facility just to sort of strengthen some of our investment pipeline within the mini grid sector. So I have spoken a lot about Pillar 1. The budget is 3 million. We've looked at some of the activities, project development, all those sorts of things. That's been covered. Pillar 2 is a $2 million budget for up to 10 developers, part-time executive support. We've discussed the logic for that. These were the requirements, so we kind of focused Pillar 1 at more established developers, so the qualifying criteria were a little higher, in terms of operational mini-grids, number of customers, installed capacity, capital raised, etc., and slightly less so for the Tier 2 or Pillar 2 beneficiaries. So we can actually say, sorry about the logos, they just would not keep still last night. But so the five selected beneficiaries for Pillar 1 is Husk Power, Equatorial Power, PowerGen, Energy City, and NEOT. And these are the countries where the resources will be deployed in each case. So congratulations to those companies. And then under Pillar 2, we have 8 companies at the moment. We're hoping to grow that as we go, but One Power, Sea Solar, Tomaso, Ashipa, Hydrobox, RV Sol, Power Hut, and African Diamond Business are the beneficiaries under Pillar 2. I have spoken about the knowledge matter. I have spoken about that. I think I've covered it. And yeah, I mean, we've got huge objectives. We really want this to be catalytic, and obviously to achieve these numbers, there are certainly, it's going to be a cooperative arrangement with other financiers coming in, and hopefully we play that catalytic role. But we do have some. Well, there have to be big targets in this sector, or don't bother. So we're looking at sort of over 400 million capital raised over the sort of project life, not necessarily the program life, and lots of capital raises around Pillar 2, slightly more modest, and then knowledge products and a number of tools, etc. And then obviously Pillar 4 is as and when what we need within SEFRA itself. I think that is it. Let's move on. Okay, thank you very much.
Thanks, Robert. I think at this stage it would be useful to hear from some of those developers that have been successful in their applications to Pillars 1 and 2. So could the following please join me on stage? We've got Gabriel Moya from Equatorial Power. Where are you, Gabriel? Yeah, I see you coming. Joahir Hassan from Tomaso, please join me. Nicole Point-Dexter from Energy, and Grace Perkins from Husk. Great. So we're going to go straight into it. Really, what I'd like to cover in this short conversation is just to understand sort of your experiences with technical assistance previously. What are some of the successes, but also what are the challenges you've faced, particularly with GFI sponsored technical assistance, and maybe hopefully what we're going to achieve out of this latest round of AMAP 2. So I'm going to start with you, Gabriel, on the end there. I think that you've positioned yourself well. What technical assistance have you received in the past, and what has worked, and what challenges have you had?
So we've received a number of technical assistance, starting with the early stage development technical assistance in different jurisdictions. We've also received operation and execution technical assistance. The role of technical assistance cannot be underplayed here, because there are certain jurisdictions, and I know some of the colleagues here might have considered growing into such markets as DR. Can you deploy solar? How can you? The challenges has been around what our friend from AMDA mentioned. Some of these technical assistance come in as those closed door, borrowing his own words, designs, and they are pushed into you, and it doesn't bring or understands the reality on the ground.
Okay, thank you. Sort of same question to you, if I may, Jai. And have you had experience also of sort of technical assistance in a pre-packaged form pushed onto you, to use Gabriel's terms?
Thank you for the questions. I think my colleague who already answered that receiving a technical assessment it's very helpful for the companies when you're starting up. But Tamarso, we have been working for 10 years. This is our 11 years. We have received a lot of technical assessment. But the technical assessment that we needed when we were in our first year and the second year is not the same as the technical assessment that we need now. The thing is, with the technical assessment that was always provided, it's same for all levels of the companies. If you are a small company, if you are a large company, if you are a startup, or if you are already working for 10 or 15 years, it's always same. And the second thing is, it's always theoretic. We don't want research or data. We want you to give me the real technical assessment, to go on with me to the ground and working with me to see what's the issues and the problem that I'm facing on the ground. Because if you're trying to teach me a lesson, I will bring the issues that I have in my mind at that moment, and we can discuss it and we move on. But going with me to the ground will bring always the new issues that I can understand and you can help me understand it. That's the point.
Okay, can you maybe just, I'm going to follow up here. Can you just be maybe a bit more practical in terms of when you're saying going on the ground, what do you need help with?
Especially, I'm going to talk about Somalia, since I'm coming from Somalia. In Somalia, we have a very low expertise when it comes to solar energy or when it comes to electricity. Very low. Our company considers one of the best, I'm not...
No, you can push your credentials, please.
One of the best companies when it comes to solar installation, but we still lack a lot of things. So when we compare ourselves to other countries or other solar energy companies that outside of Somalia, we are very low. Sorry, my boss is here. But so we always need more of the the real technical work, the financial modeling, the logistics. We need help with different kind of aspects. So that's what I'm talking about, going to the ground with me and understanding.
Great. Thank you for the concrete examples. I think they're quite helpful. Grace, let me come to you. Husk is obviously a well-known entity in the industry, has been doing work in the sector for a long, long time. Lots of experience of taking technical assistance from DFI partners. What is it that you think needs to still happen today in order to help Husk, where it's at and the challenges that it's facing?
Sure. Thanks, Benjamin. I did a quick internal survey of 2 people of what TA has been helpful, and I got one example. So I just wanted to give an example, and then I can talk about just some thoughts I have around what is helpful. So one recent example is we received some money from Swedfund. It's an external consultant helped us build a theory of change and some KPIs for impact investing, something we all have to do. That would be fine, probably if it just stopped there. It would sit in some digital folder forever. But what was really helpful, what they provided was there was then follow-on funding to hire a technical expert to help us build a digital dashboard where we now actively track those KPIs. And so it's the act of follow-on funding that allows us to actually execute. I'm looking at Don Perka from IFC in front of me who said yesterday, execute, execute, execute. So it's about what can we do? Sorry, Don. So I think when I think about one of the ways this question had been originally posed to me is what are the development partners not understanding? I think one thing that AMAP, I'm really excited about AMAP is that it's one of the first opportunities where a development partner has asked us, what do we need to accelerate deployment? And I think one of the main distinctions here is that, yes, sure, sometimes we need outside expertise, but a lot of times it's actually, when I think about capacity, it's extra people, it's resources to be able to do things that maybe I have a team focused on this type of work in Nigeria. I can't pull them from that work in Nigeria, but I need to start some work in the DRC, for example. So it's not just knowledge that's lacking, it's really human capacity and time. And so I think, yeah, the ability to put people, second people, to embed people in our team is really important. I think the other thing that I just want to say, what's most helpful for us at the moment is this type of upstream project support, so project preparation. How do I de-risk my entry into a new market, especially markets that if we cobble them together in one portfolio, most funders already think are really risky, but they're if we think about Nigeria and DRC, 2 of the most critical markets, the only ways, those 2 markets plus others that we have any chance of achieving M300. Yeah, so I think we've we as Husk, open to be corrected always, but I think we see more focus on this downstream support. So, okay, milestone-based payments, TA for existing projects, but how do we get up off the ground, de-risk it so that financing can come in?
So sort of TA that's focused on sort of corporate capacity and capabilities.
TA focused on de-risking market expansion. How are we as sure as we possibly can be and make our investors as comfortable as they can be so that we can go into new places?
I think that brings us very nicely on to Nicole, because Nicole is a multi-geography developer for her sins. Tell us some of the challenges about entering new markets. What are some of the headaches you've had to deal with? How has moving into a new geography been, unexpected surprises? And if you were to do it again, what support would you think you need?
It's funny, I asked for this question and now I don't want it anymore. So, in terms of thinking about it, we operate across 3 different markets, Sierra Leone, Liberia, and Benin. And we've learned each time that we have built a model that generally works, but it does not work perfectly in each. It's not one size fits all. And I think the most important thing for us has been listening, a point that was made at one of the tables by Robert. It's listening. It's listening to the customers. It's listening to the data. It's learning how each market is 75% of what we expected and 25% different. That does take resource to do that. And it takes structured systems to do it well. TA can be very, very helpful for doing that and de-risking and on some level, creating an unbiased canvas, because when you take your own people from market to market, they're usually like, we did it well before, so it's going to work. Whereas an unbiased listener who can look at the situation and say, these processes are not going to fit the same way. And so I think that there's a lot of value in that. But actually, going back to the earlier question, that's not what we asked for. We asked for TA in a slightly different context, and we're super excited about the AMAP window. For context, we have not ever sought TA before, and this was the first real window where we thought this was a real opportunity, and we looked at it in a very particular way. And to bring you back to the comment that you made about the scale that we need, to put it in context, if there are 50 developers achieving the Mission 300 goal, that means each of us is building 60 mini-grids a month. Now, not next week, not next year, this month. Because if we don't do it this month, then next month it's more. So our company, maybe some of y'all wouldn't break, we would break if that's what we were actually doing next month. And so it's not so much, what we focused on was where we break first. And for us, it was really building the supply chain projects. And when I say supply chain, it's not the panel manufacturer, those relationships. It's how do we track inventory? It's how do we make sure the logistics work, that getting things to site, particularly when the roads are complete mud 6 months out of the year. It's those practical things that are where we break if we're trying to build 12, which was, I think, the target we put in the application, but now 60 mini-grids at a time. So that was a really key thing. I think the other thing that we put in, thinking about our business not as a project developer or an operator of portfolios, but rather a modern African utility. Part of it is you got to get big fast, but the other part is you have to be able to create demand and support customers to be able to utilize the electricity. And then what I suspect most of us are really in it for, it's how do we enable those customers to build wealth. And as someone said on the table on the other side, that is not something, it is something that my company, we're staffed to do, but we don't do it brilliantly yet. And there's still a whole lot left to learn. And so we were really excited because this was a window that gave us the flexibility to really dig in deep on PUE and how we build models that go from, yeah, we've got 1,000 freezers in the market, to we've built 60 mini-grids a month, and how we roll out a freezer to just use one example. But how do we roll out that methodology across large-scale utility deployments? So those were the two areas that we were excited to be able to work on through AMAP, and some context as to why that was kind of why we focused on our breaking point as we scale.
I'm sure you can do it if you ask you to do a mini grids now. But even if you are a company that will well prepared to start working right now, we have a plan to do like 24 mini grids immediately, and we have a plan to do 150 in the upcoming 2 years. The thing is, we have organized everything, that we have the plan, we have the supply chain ready, you have everything ready, but we are lacking of the finance. That's the thing. Once the finance is ready, you already need to start again from zero, because everything changed. The supply chain will change, the communities that you communicate with them in the first place, they will change, everything will change. So the period of time that always asking for finance takes, it takes 1 year, 2 years to grant some money that you can start up with. Then you need to start again from zero. The thing is, a lot of developers, especially Somalia, we have a plan ready, but we don't have the finance for it. And once we get the finance, we need to start again. We need to throw everything that we have worked on, then we start again from zero. Different case.
So I think, Nicole, you've largely answered my next question, which was going to be, what do you hope to achieve and what are you excited about?
We are trying to lower the cost of electricity in Somalia and get bigger as a company. You have a bigger capacity, move on, and enter a new market. We're trying to start in Kenya, we're trying to start in Ethiopia. So this is one of the calls that we're trying to work on, and this is one of the things that we want the technical assist to help enter a new markets.
To Grace?
Sure. So we are excited about developing pipeline in a couple new markets as faster than we would without the support of AMAP. So I think that's on kind of, again, if we think about the human resource side, and then thinking about the technical capacity, expertise side, enhancing our technical capacities to accelerate deployment of interconnected mini-grid projects in Nigeria.
So in our case, we are looking at consolidating, because initially we were in different jurisdictions, and the effect of growing thin really affected our turnaround time, and the technical assistance for the 2.0 seeks to help with the permitting and project development around DRC and Uganda, and we are looking at 4 sites in DRC with an average connection capacity of 5,000 per site. And in Uganda, we are looking at 30 new islands, each a capacity of half a megawatt.
Great. Thank you for the brief snapshot. I really like the fact that developers obviously all at slightly different stages, all grappling with similar but actually quite specific challenges within your organizations. And I quite like the fact that we've sort of just had a glimpse of the breadth of the things that we're going to be working on together. So please, a round of applause for my panelists here. And I'm going to hand over back to our hosts.
Thank you so much, and we'll also have a round of applause for Benjamin and Robert from AMAP. It's really amazing stuff they're doing, and it's really interesting to see this market responsive TA. It's definitely what's needed. Okay, so we're moving into the favorite part. Firstly, I see we have a lot of new people in the room, so just a really quick recap. This is kind of a very interactive session. The aim is to have table dialogue, so we've got a really interesting mix of people, a lot of expertise in the room from all sectors. So what we're trying to do is have at each table, there's a facilitator, right? So quick hands up in the facilitators. Hands up. I just want to make sure we have one at every... Okay, one at each table. Cool. Oh, Oliver's there. Great. At the back? Okay, great. Andrew. Okay, so developers. Please, if you're a mini-grid developer, put your hand up, please. Have to make sure we've got a... Okay. If anyone's not at a table, please come and join. There's a table here. Here we don't have a table, so if we've got 2 mini-grid developers somewhere, come over here. Perfect, let's mix around a little bit. And then obviously TA providers. There's quite a few. Okay, so they've left, the TA. no, just kidding, I see a lot of them. And then the financiers. You guys can't sit together. Okay, so we've got Don here, we've got a few people. Okay. We've got many governments. So can some of the government people switch around? This is, and who's at the back? What's the composition at the back? Any developers back there? Any mini-grid experts? Well, feel free to comment. I mean, it's really, we're all friends here. Pull up a chair, join a table, and just really just jump in on the dialogues, because for the next 20 minutes, we're going to be talking. So feel free to jump in. On a deux tables francophones, en fait. Donc, si vous parlez français, vous voulez parler français, vous pouvez parler français. Mais donc, il y a deux tables ici qui parlent français. Okay, so these are the two questions. So have a look. So it's very much developer focused, obviously. And so the idea is really from your expertise. If a typical developer in your market had $10 million available in appropriately structured finance tomorrow, do you think that developer could effectively deploy it within 2 years? And if so, what would the constraints be? So it's a bit of a big question, but let's give it a go. And then question 2 is more related to, okay, so if not, what are the capacities that are missing? Okay, so over to the room, and see you again in about 20 minutes. same presentation.
Okay.
That's all right.
Sure.
Okay, so the feedback is standing between us and lunch. Yeah. Okay, so let's take it to the floor. So we have about 10 minutes, so we probably won't be able to hear all tables, but maybe we'll start over here. And let's hear. So the idea, really, the next exercise is we're going to report back, no repetition. So if you already hear someone say what you're going to say,
would be having the right people who are able to execute this work. And in terms of right people, we're talking about people with capacity who understand the mini-grids and the mini-grid sector.
Is not having that in place already. And then beyond that, is not having that in place already. And then beyond that, execution at context, 2 years, 10 million. I think the biggest we agreed. Biggest challenge with TA today is it brings in consultant. Biggest challenge with TA today is it brings in consultants that deliver on a milestone and then go off. And the biggest miss, and I've said this to everybody from AMAP, that is Robert has asked me, is that the fundamental challenge is we're not building capacity within the developers. And in a world where corporate equity is scarce and we cannot hire those people directly, we end up having to go back next year again and ask for more TA money to get particular milestones resolved. And
Irrespective of where they are, they probably couldn't pull this off. You know, if they were too sort of immature and they didn't have, irrespective of where they are, they probably couldn't pull this off. You know, if they were too sort of immature and they didn't have a track record, they wouldn't really know what to do. So it's kind of like that internal-external dynamic. You know, a solid developer in a good market, all things being equal, yes. But if we want to grow the market and grow the number of developers and grow the number of countries involved in helping us get there, then no. And then if it's no, what do they need? And then it's more like what AMDA and AMAP are doing around sort of building capacity, hopefully, like Vivian said, on a long-term basis. But yeah, that was our position.
thanks so much. So yeah, really related to context and also making sure that just taking the onus of responsibility a little bit off the developers and talking about actually enabling environments as well there. Okay, Nashwa, over to you. I think we need more mics circulating.
Quick one from our group. We did discuss some of these, but I think firstly we started by saying yes. I think we said yes, we can deploy the mini grids in 2 years, but then there was also a question about what the conditions of the finance are, and that it's not possible to do it alone. They need the engineering, construction. They need the right partners to be able to deploy it in 2 years. And the feasibility studies, the pipeline that each developer has. Mostly, there is a pipeline, but to create that pipeline, they need project preparation, grants, et cetera, So that needs to be in place for them to create a pipeline that doesn't grow old before the financing comes to them. We didn't have enough time to discuss question 2, but we did start by saying the skills. The skills is a big gap, especially social capacity to engage with the customers, especially after you go, when you've done your feasibility study, you created your pipeline, after a few years, you go back to them, the customers, the site's probably gone out, or they're questioning whether you would have ever come back in the first place. So that sort of engagement with the customers is also a skill that they said would be needed to scale.
Thank you. Yeah, super interesting point. And Jawa here actually mentioned that earlier as well, and I thought was really important. The fact that the money needs to be ready as well. So the developers might be ready, they might have everyone engaged, but the money is not yet there. And that's what we'll get into a little bit in the financing session as well. Let's take it here to this table.
Yeah. Hello, my name is Edwin Akabilo. I'm from a company based in Switzerland. And yeah, money for us is not really the issue because we have most of the technicalities, and with experience in Africa, it shouldn't be an issue. But at the same time, our focus was more of Ethiopia. So I think one of the challenges we are going to have in the development is not about the technology, it's more about the cultural aspect of it. So, and it's involved more talking with the local, having local partners, maybe NGO, to do the most important feasibility studies, understanding the culture where the system will be deployed, and how the people relate to solar energy. Because in some countries, if you have seen the news, some people might go and destroy it, claiming that this is the local community, as well as the condition for the loan, because the CAPES, and for us, Swiss company, our focus is always about continuity and sustainability. And so bringing the system, the technology is not the issue. The issue is more about how do we ensure that the local community could be able to sustain the technology we are putting in place. So one of the critical aspects of the, for us, for question 2 would be finding the right partners on the ground and giving them the right training to be able to manage the system. In as much as we have technology today, we can do remote monitoring, but the response time to get into the system when issues arise is very critical. And another aspect might be, when it comes to billing, even though we have the technology for billing, but the culture of paying, is it pay as you go? How do people react when you cut off the system? So these are could be one of the challenges in deploying system in Africa. So if we get that right, we can go for it. But money, for us, it shouldn't be the issue. The issue is the culture, the people, training, and sustainability. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Yeah, that was also mentioned earlier, community, right? And you also mentioned something about OPEX subsidies, not in so many words, but that's another part of the conversation. No one's talked about that yet today, but it's very relevant. And then, yeah, I think there was one more point, but it slipped my mind. And in the interest of time, we'll go to Grace.
Can I?
Oh, sorry.
Have the mic.
Over to Lauren.
Thanks. I'm going to be really brief because the question of how to develop such a pipeline and the need for technical assistance, capability to do all the studies, community engagement, before you can actually deploy these 10 million. Because 2 years means you need to have a pipeline already, and you need money before that in terms of technical assistance. So going to a suggestion in terms of how technical assistance can evolve. Well, part of the bottlenecks to deploy these pipelines are permits and tariff approvals. And so this is on the public sector. And part of the technical assistance needed is for the developers. So the need is really to bridge the gap and technical assistance to link these two sets of actors, so public sector and private sector, to make this deployment also possible. So not only to developers, but also to public sector.
Absolutely, and I think that's just further kind of reiterating the importance of all of us working together, right? And then AMAP is working on the private sector, and then at UNDP, we're working on AMP with the public sector, and the policy de-risking is incredibly important as well. Rush, because we're at lunchtime, guys, and we need to all make sure we have lunch before we go to financing. So over to Matteo, and then I think we can probably wrap it.
Yeah, actually, a lot of what have been discussed in the table echo Lauren's table, but a big point was on the time frame required to perform the feasibility studies, and that can take over a year to have feasibility and social environmental impact assessment approved, so they can be processed to accelerate that or standardize those processes to advance more rapidly. And then the time frame for call for proposal or RFPs or tenders process, which can be very long as well. Experience that have been shared over 3 years for call for proposal to be finalized, and also criteria of MDBs or DFIs may be too high for the qualifications of local developers. and some process have been desert for 5 years, so there can be also improvement in that.
Thank you so much. Yes, that was the point I was trying to, the pipeline, exactly, super important. And then also, that's a great way to finish this session because it segues really nicely into the financing session, which will happen immediately after lunch, where we're going to hear from financiers on what they can finance and talk a little bit about reducing that complexity that Matteo just spoke to. And we'll also hear from some developers that have actually been financed. So we'll stop now for lunch. Please all join us back. I think the financing session is one of the most critical and anticipated. Oh, I'm sorry, Grace, please. We're going to, one more thing. And
no worries. So just 1 minute. For us at table, our developer said yes, he can start by tomorrow if he gets the funding today. He already has 24 projects ready to be deployed. So, and the regulatory system in Somalia is okay. Everything is okay, so he's able to deploy. And for question 2, something that came up is having embedded staff within the company to be able to help them improve the skills. For example, CFOs from the utility to come and support the companies to build those skills and then leave the skills with the company people. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Okay, so I mean, we could keep talking about this forever. I saw others over there want to speak, so we'll at lunch, everyone sit together, talk about mini-grids. It's great. So we'll see you at 1:30. I know that kind of cuts a little bit short, but I think, we can do this, right? 1:30, if you come back in the room, please encourage everyone to join us again. As I mentioned, it's going to be a really interesting discussion, moderated by Don Puck over here. So, yeah, see you at 1:30 here. Round of applause.